Hey everyone, welcome back. One of the things I love about our deep dives is how
Oh, no.
they help us uncover those hidden biases.
Oh, yeah.
The ones that can really mess with our self-improvement efforts.
Mm,
And today we're tackling a big one,
okay.
the Dunning-Kruger Effect.
Right?
Have you ever heard of this one?
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating concept.
Lay it on us.
Yeah, so in essence, the Dunning-Kruger effect describes this cognitive bias
Okay.
where people who are less competent in a particular area,
Hmm.
they tend to overestimate their abilities.
Oh, interesting.
It's almost like they're lacking the self-awareness
Yeah.
to accurately judge their own skills.
Okay, so let's say I decide to pick up knitting.
Okay.
Based on what you're saying, if I'm terrible at it,
Uh,
like dropping stitches and
yeah,
creating a tangled mess,
right.
I might actually think I'm doing a pretty decent job.
That's the gist of it. And the irony is,
Yeah.
the less skilled you are,
Uh-huh.
the more likely you are to have this inflated sense of competence.
Whoa.
And it's not that you're intentionally being delusional or anything.
Right.
It's more about a lack of understanding of what true competence in that area actually looks like.
I see. I see. I can see how that would be a problem, especially for those of us who are constantly striving to learn and grow.
Right.
You think you're making progress, but you might be totally off track because
Yeah.
you're not even aware of your own shortcomings.
Exactly. And the original research on this was actually pretty humorous.
Oh, really?
Back in 1999,
Okay.
David Dunning and Justin Kruger, they did a study where they tested participants on their logic, grammar, and humor skills.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And get this, those who scored in the bottom quartile, meaning they performed quite poorly,
Oh, no.
they vastly overestimated their abilities.
So they were basically bombing the tests,
Pretty much.
but they thought they were doing way better than they actually were.
They thought they were in the 62nd percentile,
Oh, wow.
when in reality, their scores put them in the 12th.
Ouch. Talk about a reality check. Yeah, big time. Now, I know some people might hear this and think, oh, so you're saying incompetent people are just as confident as experts.
Right, right.
But that's not really what the Dunning-Kruger effect is about, is it?
You're right to point that out.
Yeah.
It's not about equal levels of confidence.
Gotcha.
It's about the degree of overestimation.
Mm-hmm.
People with more expertise are generally better at assessing their own abilities.
Yep.
Although they can still underestimate themselves sometimes.
Sure.
The key point is that those with lower competence tend to overestimate their skills to a greater extent.
That makes sense. So it's like everyone has the potential to misjudge their abilities, but it's more pronounced in those who lack experience or knowledge in a specific area.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's all about having a realistic view of where you stand.
Right.
And to understand why this happens, there are a few different explanations that researchers have put forth,
Okay.
each offering a unique perspective on how our minds work, or sometimes don't work, when it comes to evaluating ourselves.
Okay. I'm all ears. Let's dive into those explanations because I'm curious to know what's going on in our brains
Yeah, for sure.
that leads to this skewed self-perception.
So one explanation is the metacognitive explanation,
Okay.
which basically suggests that people who are less competent in a particular area,
Right.
they lack the metacognitive skills to accurately judge their own performance.
Interesting.
They might be missing that internal feedback loop
Mm-hmm.
that allows them to recognize the difference between good and bad performance.
So it's like they're missing that inner critic
Yes,
that helps us evaluate our own work.
exactly. It's like they're trying to build a house without a level.
Okay.
They don't have the tools to accurately measure how straight or sturdy their work actually is.
That's a great analogy.
Facts.
So they might be putting in a lot of effort,
Yeah.
but not seeing the results because they don't have the awareness to identify and correct their mistakes.
Right. And another perspective is the statistical explanation, which focuses on statistical phenomena like regression to the mean and the better than average effect.
Right.
Now, these might sound a bit technical,
Yeah, a little bit.
but they have real-world implications for how we perceive our abilities.
Okay, I have to admit, regression to the mean sounds a bit intimidating.
I know, right?
Can you break it down for us in plain English?
Absolutely. Think about it like this.
Okay.
Imagine you have a really bad day at work. Everything seems to go wrong.
Yeah,
Chances are the next day won't be quite as terrible.
hopefully.
Not because you suddenly became a superstar overnight,
Uh-huh. Right.
but simply because statistically, it's unlikely to have two awful days in a row.
I see. I see.
That's regression to the mean. Extreme values tend to move closer to the average over time.
So in terms of the Dunning-Kruger effects, if someone with low competence initially overestimates their ability,
Right.
their self-assessment is likely to become more accurate over time, even if their skills don't actually improve much. Simply because statistically, they can't stay at that extreme level of overestimation forever.
That's it. And the better than average effect adds another layer to this.
Okay.
It's this common human tendency to think we're above average
Uh-huh.
in various skills and traits, even though statistically that's impossible.
I've definitely fallen into that trap myself.
Me too.
It's like we all want to believe we're special and talented,
Right.
even if the reality is a bit more average.
Right. And when you combine that with regression to the mean,
Yeah,
you can see how people with low competence might initially overestimate their abilities even more.
I see.
They start with an inflated sense of competence,
Uh-huh.
and then statistical factors make it seem like their assessments are becoming more accurate,
Right.
even if they aren't actually getting any better.
Yeah. That's a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
So we've got this internal metacognitive explanation
Uh-huh.
and this external statistical explanation.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other theories about why this effect happens?
There's also the irrational explanation, which focuses on the role of prior beliefs.
Okay.
Basically, it suggests that people with low competence might have overly optimistic beliefs about their skills before they even start a task.
Oh, interesting.
These pre-existing notions, even if they're unfounded,
Yeah.
can lead to inflated self-assessments.
Oh, it's like they're already starting with a biased baseline,
Right.
assuming they're better than they actually are,
Uh-huh.
which then colors their perception of their own performance.
Exactly. It's like if I went into a pottery class convinced I was a natural,
Uh-huh.
even though I'd never touched clay before.
Uh-huh. I can see it.
That initial overconfidence might make me interpret my wobbly, lopsided pots as signs of artistic genius.
Totally. Okay, so we've got these three different explanations, each shedding light on why people might overestimate their abilities.
Right.
But what does this all mean for us, especially those of us who are passionate about self-improvement?
That's a great question.
Why should we even care about this effect?
That's the key question, isn't it? And the answer is,
Yeah.
the Dunning-Kruger effect can have some serious consequences in our lives,
Oh.
especially when it comes to making important decisions.
Oh.
Think about it. If we're not aware of our own limitations, we might end up making choices that aren't in our best interest.
Oh, for sure.
Like, imagine someone deciding to become a surgeon because they're super confident in their natural talent,
Right.
even though they haven't actually gone to medical school.
Yeah, that's a pretty extreme example.
Yeah.
But it highlights the point perfectly.
Yeah.
The Dunning-Kruger effect can lead to poor decision-making across various areas of our lives,
Absolutely.
from career choices to personal relationships. And it can be especially problematic in fields where self-assessment plays a critical role.
Right.
Okay, so give me a real-world example.
Sure.
How might the Dunning-Kruger effect show up in, say, vocational counseling?
Okay, so imagine you're a career counselor
Okay.
and you're working with someone who's convinced they'd excel as a financial analyst. They're super confident in their math skills and their ability to handle complex data.
Mm-hmm.
But when you dig a little deeper,
Yeah.
you realize their understanding of finance is actually quite limited.
So they might be overestimating their abilities based on a surface-level understanding of the field?
Exactly. And if they're not willing to acknowledge those limitations,
Yeah.
they might end up pursuing a career path that ultimately leads to frustration and disappointment.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
It's like they're setting themselves up for failure because they haven't accurately assessed their skills and knowledge.
And it's not just about career choices.
Right.
Think about evaluating information literacy skills.
Okay.
In today's world where we're bombarded with information from all directions,
Oh, yeah.
it's crucial to be able to critically evaluate sources and identify misinformation.
Oh, absolutely. With all the fake news and online echo chambers out there, being able to think critically and discern fact from fiction is more important than ever.
But if someone is overconfident in their ability to spot fake news or bias,
Right.
they might be more susceptible to falling for misinformation.
Yeah.
They might think they're savvy enough to navigate the online world, but in reality, they're lacking the skills to accurately assess the information they're consuming.
That's a scary thought.
It is.
It's like they're walking through a minefield of misinformation without realizing the danger.
And here's the real kicker.
What's that?
The Dunning-Kruger effect can actually hinder self-improvement.
Oh, how so?
Think about it. If you're unaware of your shortcomings, You're less likely to see the need to improve.
It's like a vicious cycle.
Exactly.
You overestimate your abilities so you don't see the need to put in the effort to learn and grow,
Yeah.
which keeps you stuck at a lower level of competence.
Exactly. And that's why understanding this effect is so crucial,
Right.
especially for people like our listeners
Yeah.
who are actively engaged in self-improvement and the pursuit of knowledge.
So how do we break free from that cycle?
Well, the first step is
Okay.
awareness.
Okay.
Simply knowing about the Dunning-Kruger effect
Right.
can help us be more mindful of our own potential biases.
Okay.
It's like having a mental warning sign that says, hey, you might be overestimating yourself here. Proceed with caution.
I like that. That's a great point.
Yeah,
It's like that saying, the first step to solving a problem is admitting you have one,
right.
but awareness is just the beginning, right?
Right.
What else can we do to mitigate the impact of this bias?
The next step is to cultivate intellectual humility.
Oh,
It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers and being open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
I love that idea.
Yeah,
It's about embracing that beginner's mindset,
right.
that willingness to be a student, even in areas where we think we're pretty knowledgeable.
Exactly. And it means being open to feedback,
Okay.
even if it's not what we want to hear.
Right.
Sometimes the most valuable insights come from people who are willing to challenge our assumptions and point out our blind spots.
That can be tough, though, right?
Yeah.
No one likes to hear that they're not as good at something as they thought they were.
It can be challenging,
Yeah.
but it's essential for growth.
Uh,
Think of it as an opportunity to learn and improve.
Okay.
Instead of getting defensive or dismissing feedback,
Right.
try to see it as a valuable gift.
So instead of thinking, "Ugh, they're just trying to be mean,"
Right.
we should be thinking, okay, maybe there's something here I can learn from.
Exactly. And remember, feedback doesn't always have to come from other people.
Oh, that's true.
We can also cultivate self-reflection
Mm-hmm.
and regularly evaluate our own skills and knowledge.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What areas do I need to improve in?
It's like doing a personal inventory of our skills and knowledge.
Yeah.
And the key is to be honest with ourselves, right? No sugarcoating.
Honesty is crucial.
Yeah.
It's tempting to focus on our strengths and downplay our weaknesses,
Yeah.
but that's not going to help us grow. It's about being realistic and acknowledging areas where we need to put in more effort.
And sometimes that means stepping outside of our comfort zones and trying new things.
Yes.
It's easy to stick with what we're good at,
Right.
but real growth often happens when we challenge ourselves to learn something new.
Absolutely. And that's where your intellectual curiosity can become a superpower.
That's a good point.
Embrace that desire to
Yeah.
learn and explore.
Yeah.
And don't let the fear of being wrong hold you back.
So it's about having that growth mindset, that belief that our abilities can be developed with effort and learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about remembering that making mistakes is part of the process.
Exactly. We all make mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
The key is to learn from them and use them as opportunities for growth.
Right.
And remember, even the most intelligent and accomplished people fall prey to the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh, well.
It's a human cognitive bias,
Ah,
not a sign of stupidity.
that makes me feel better.
So don't beat yourself up if you find yourself overestimating your abilities in a particular area.
That's reassuring.
It means we're all in this together.
So what's the takeaway here?
Good question.
What's the one thing we want our listeners to remember about the Dunning-Kruger effect?
The key takeaway is that awareness is power.
Mhm.
Simply knowing about this effect can help us be more mindful of our own potential biases and take steps to mitigate their impact.
I like it.
It's about cultivating intellectual humility, being open to feedback, and embracing a growth mindset.
That's great advice.
Thank you.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Dunning-Kruger effect, I want to leave you with a final thought. Now that you're aware of this cognitive bias, how might it be influencing your own self-perceptions and decisions?
You know, it really makes you think
Yeah?
about all the different ways this
Yeah.
would be playing out in our lives.
Are there areas where you might be overestimating your abilities?
That's a great question.
What steps can you take to address those blind spots and continue on your path of self-improvement?
I think a good starting point is
Yeah.
to really think about those areas where you feel most confident.
Okay.
And maybe challenge yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, is this confidence based on actual skill and knowledge? Or am I maybe letting the Dunning-Kruger effect lead me astray?
It's like taking a step back
Yeah,
and really evaluating those areas where we think we're experts.
exactly. And don't be afraid to seek out feedback from others.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Sometimes an outside perspective can be really helpful in identifying those blind spots.
And it's not just about identifying areas where we need to improve, right?
Right.
It's also about celebrating our strengths.
Absolutely. Recognizing and appreciating our strength is just as important as acknowledging our weaknesses.
For sure.
It helps us build confidence and focus our efforts on areas where we can truly excel.
So it's about finding that balance, being honest with ourselves about both our strengths and weaknesses,
Mhm.
and using that knowledge to guide our self-improvement journey.
It's like having a roadmap for personal growth.
Yeah, I like that.
We can use this awareness of the Dunning-Kruger effect to navigate our way toward greater knowledge, skill,
Yeah,
and ultimately fulfillment.
I love that analogy.
Yes.
It's like we're all explorers on a quest for self-improvement.
Right.
And this knowledge is like a compass that helps us stay on course.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
That's a good point.
There's always more to learn, more to discover, and more ways to grow.
Well, I think this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive.
It has been fun.
I know I've learned a lot about myself and how to approach my own self-improvement efforts with a bit more humility and awareness.
I'm glad to hear that.
To all our listeners out there, keep that intellectual curiosity burning bright. And remember, a little bit of self-awareness goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep diving deep.